I'm Emma Hartwell, 32 years old. 48 hours ago, I stood in a hospital room and watched my father sign a DNR order for my mother, not because she was dying but because he wanted to save money for his mistress. What he didn't know was that I'd already found the offshore accounts, the forged documents, and the real reason my mother had been sick for the past 3 years. Before I continue, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to know how this story ends. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, in one of those picture-perfect colonial houses that screamed old money even though we were firmly middle class. My father, Robert Hartwell, was a financial advisor at Morgan Stanley. My mother, Catherine, had been a pediatric nurse before she got sick. Or so I thought. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My brother Marcus was the golden child, captain of the lacrosse team at Georgetown, now working at Goldman Sachs, driving a BMW M5 that my parents bought him for his 25th birthday. My sister Claire was the baby, the princess who could do no wrong, currently finding herself in Bali on my parents' dime while posting Instagram stories from the 4 seasons. Then there was me, the responsible one, the one who went to state school instead of private university because someone has to be practical, Emma. The one who became a CPA and worked 60-hour weeks at a mid-sized firm in Stamford. The one who paid my own student loans while Marcus got his paid off as a graduation gift. My mother got diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome when I was 22. At least that's what my father told everyone. She stopped working, stopped going out, started spending most of her time in bed. My father hired a full-time nurse, Svetlana, a quiet woman from Ukraine who barely spoke English. "Your mother needs rest," my father would say whenever I suggested seeing a specialist. "The doctors say there's nothing they can do. We just have to make her comfortable." I visited every Sunday, brought flowers, read to her. She seemed off, drowsy, confused. Sometimes she didn't recognize me, other times she'd grab my hand and whisper, "Something's wrong, Emma, something's very wrong." "What do you mean, Mom?" But then Svetlana would come in with medication, and my mother would drift off again. 3 years ago my father called a family meeting at the house. Marcus flew in from New York. Claire came home from wherever she'd been that month. I think it was Costa Rica. "Your mother's condition is deteriorating," my father announced. We were sitting in the formal living room, the one with the Persian rugs and the grandfather clock that had belonged to my mother's family. "The medical bills are substantial. We're going to need to make some difficult financial decisions." "What kind of decisions?" I asked. My father's jaw tightened. He always hated when I asked direct questions. "We may need to sell some assets, downsize. Your mother's care is expensive." "How expensive?" I pulled out my phone, opening my notes app. "Have you looked into Medicare, Medicaid? What about her insurance through the hospital?" "Emma, don't be crass," Claire said, examining her manicure. "This isn't about spreadsheets." "Actually, it is exactly about spreadsheets," I said. "I'm a CPA. Let me look at the finances. Maybe I can help restructure." "That won't be necessary," my father cut me off. His voice had that edge it got when the discussion was over. "I have everything under control. I just wanted you all to be aware of the situation." That should have been my first warning sign. Fast forward to 3 weeks ago. I got a call from Greenwich Hospital at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Is this Emma Hartwell? You're listed as Catherine Hartwell's emergency contact." My heart stopped. "Yes, what happened?" "Is my mother okay?" "Your mother was brought in by ambulance 40 minutes ago. She's stable now, but we need you to come in. There are some concerns." I threw on clothes and drove the 20 minutes to the hospital in a fog. When I got there, a doctor I'd never seen before, Dr. Sarah Chen, according to her badge, pulled me into a private consultation room. "Miss Hartwell, I'm glad you're here. I need to ask you some questions about your mother's medical history." "Okay, what's going on? Is she all right?" Dr. Chen looked at her tablet, then at me. "Your mother was brought in unconscious. The home nurse called 911 when she couldn't wake her. When we ran blood work, we found extremely high levels of benzodiazepines and sedatives in her system. Levels that suggest chronic, sustained use far beyond any legitimate medical purpose." The room tilted. "What are you saying? Miss Hartwell, your mother, doesn't have chronic fatigue syndrome. She's been systematically sedated, based on the levels we're seeing, and her reported symptoms over the past 3 years. I believe she's been drugged almost continuously for years." I couldn't breathe. That's not possible. Her doctors. Who are her doctors? We need to contact them immediately. That's when I realized I didn't know. My father had always handled all of that. I'd never questioned it. "I need to call my father," I said, pulling out my phone. "Actually," Dr. Chen said carefully, "your father is already here. He arrived about 20 minutes ago. He's with your mother now." Something in her tone made me stand up. "Where?" Room 347, but Miss Hartwell, I was already moving. I found my father in the room, standing over my mother's bed. She was unconscious, hooked up to various monitors, and my father was talking to a doctor I didn't recognize, a thin man with nervous eyes. Just needs to be kept comfortable, my father was saying. She wouldn't want extraordinary measures. Dad? I stepped into the room, both men turned. My father's expression flickered, surprise, then annoyance, then smoothed into concern. Emma, I was just about to call you. Dr. Chen already did. What's going on? She said Mom's been drugged. The thin doctor, I caught his name tag, Dr. Howard Mercer, cleared his throat. That's a very inflammatory way to characterize. Is it true? I looked at my father. Your mother has been on necessary medication for her condition, my father said smoothly. Sometimes the dosages need adjustment. Dr. Mercer has been handling her care. Dr. Mercer? I turned to the nervous man. I've never heard of you. Where's Mom's regular doctor? I am her regular doctor, he said, not meeting my eyes. I specialize in chronic fatigue and pain management. Something was very, very wrong. Emma, my father said, his voice taking on that edge again. You're upset, understandably. But this isn't the time. Your mother needs rest and we need to make some important decisions about her care going forward. What decisions? He exchanged a look with Dr. Mercer, then pulled out a document. Given your mother's condition and the likelihood that she'll continue to decline, I think it's time we put a DNR order in place. Do not resuscitate. It's what she would want, to not be kept alive artificially if something happens. My hands went cold. She's unconscious because she's been overdosed on sedatives. How is that a reason for a DNR? Emma, don't be dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, my voice echoed in the small room. I want a second opinion. I want her moved to a different doctor. You want a lot of things, Emma, my father said, and there it was, the contempt he usually worked harder to hide. But you're not her medical power of attorney. I am, and I'm making the decision that's best for your mother and this family. He signed the DNR form with a flourish. Dr. Mercer witnessed it. I watched him do it and something inside me broke open. Or maybe it had been broken all along and I was finally feeling it. Get out, I said quietly. My father frowned. What? Get out of this room, now, before I call security and tell them exactly what I think is happening here. He stared at me for a long moment, then he smiled, this cold, thin smile I'd never seen before. You always were the difficult one, he said. Fine, but you're going to regret making a scene about this, Emma. You have no idea what you're interfering with. He left. Dr. Mercer scurried after him. I sat down next to my mother's bed and took her hand. For the first time in 3 years I really looked at her, at the gauntness of her face, the way her muscles had atrophied, the slight tremor even in unconsciousness, and I made a decision. I know some of you watching have been through something similar. If this is resonating with you, drop a comment below. Let me know you're here. And if you want to know what happened next, because trust me, this gets intense, make sure you're subscribed. I took the next week off work. Told my boss it was a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie. First I went to see Dr. Chen. I need your help, I told her. I think my father has been poisoning my mother. She was quiet for a moment. That's a serious allegation. I know, but everything you told me, the sedatives, the levels in her system, it all points to intentional overdosing, doesn't it? It could be medical malpractice, it could be negligence, or yes, it could be intentional, but you'd need evidence. What if I can get it? She studied me. Then I'd recommend you contact Adult Protective Services, and possibly the police. I left the hospital and drove straight to my parents' house. Used my key. They'd never bothered to change the locks after I moved out. Svetlana was in the kitchen, making tea. Emma, she said surprised, your mother is at hospital. I know, Svetlana, I need to ask you something and I need you to tell me the truth. Has my father been giving you medications to give to my mother? Her face went white. I am nurse. I give medications prescribed by doctor. What medications? How much? She looked terrified. Mr. Hartwell say this is what doctor orders. I cannot. Svetlana. I stepped closer, keeping my voice gentle. My mother almost died. The hospital said she's been overdosed on sedatives for years. If my father told you to give her those medications, you're not in trouble. But I need to know the truth. Her eyes filled with tears. He give me list, every day, pills, liquids, sometimes injections. He say this is what doctor prescribed, but, she wiped her eyes. Sometimes I think is too much, but he is husband. He would not hurt wife, yes? Where's the list? She went to a drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. It was in my father's handwriting, a medication schedule that would make a pharmacist's head spin. Benzodiazepines, sedatives, muscle relaxants, all at doses that were, I wasn't a medical professional but even I could tell this was excessive. Can I keep this? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. One more question. Has anyone else been coming to the house, besides you and my father? There is woman, Svetlana said quietly. She comes sometimes when your mother is sleeping. She and Mr. Hartwell, they go to study. I am not supposed to see, but I see. My stomach dropped. What does she look like? Tall, blonde, young, very pretty. She wear expensive clothes. How long has she been coming? 3 years, maybe more. Of course. I went to my father's study. It was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key. In the grandfather clock, same place it had been since I was a kid. His office was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, leather chairs, diplomas on the wall, and his computer, which I knew he never locked because he thought he was too smart to need to. It took me 20 minutes to find the first file. It was labeled CKH Medical and contained scanned documents, prescriptions, medical notes, all signed by Dr. Howard Mercer. But when I looked at the dates, something was off. The chronic fatigue diagnosis was dated 6 months before my mother's actual symptoms started. This had been planned. I kept digging. Found a folder labeled Cayman Holdings. Inside were bank statements for an offshore account. In my mother's name, with a balance of $2.3 million. I stared at the screen. My mother had been a nurse. My father was a financial advisor, successful but not wealthy. Where had $2.3 million come from? I opened another file. This one made my blood run cold. It was my maternal grandmother's will. She died 8 years ago, and I remembered my father saying she'd left everything to charity. But according to this document, she'd left her entire estate, $2.8 million from the sale of her home and investments, to my mother. There was a letter from the estate attorney, dated 7.5 years ago. Dear Mrs. Hartwell, enclosed, please find the final disbursement of your inheritance from Margaret Sullivan's estate. The total amount of $2,847,392.16 has been transferred to the account you specified. My mother had never mentioned this. Had she even known? I kept reading. Found emails between my father and someone named V. Reynolds. The emails went back 3 years, right when my mother got sick. Robert, can't wait to see you this weekend. Booked us the usual suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston. I've been looking at those properties in Maui you sent. I think the one in Wailea is perfect. When do you think we can make the move? All my love, Veronica. V. Soon. Everything is proceeding as planned. C is completely manageable now. The doctor is on board. Another 6 to 12 months and we can finalize everything. The money is already moved, she'll never know. By the time anyone questions anything, we'll be untouchable. R. I read through 3 years of emails, watching my father plan my mother's slow destruction in real time. He'd been systematically drugging her to keep her incapacitated while he drained her inheritance. He'd forged her signature on documents transferring the money to offshore accounts. He'd paid Dr. Mercer $75,000 to falsify medical records and prescribe dangerous levels of medication. And Veronica Reynolds, I found her Instagram, 28 years old, blonde, beautiful, posting pictures from Bali, Paris, the Maldives, all places my father had supposedly been going for work conferences. The final piece was a document dated 2 weeks ago, a revision to my mother's will, forged signature again. Leaving everything to my father, with specific instructions that in the event of her death, all assets would be immediately transferred to a trust he controlled. He was going to kill her. The DNR wasn't about mercy. It was about making sure that when the drugs finally did their work, no one would save her. I sat in my father's chair, in his locked office, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, and I started to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because I'd spent my entire life thinking I was the problem, the difficult daughter, the ungrateful child, when really, I'd just been the one he couldn't control. Before I continue, I need to pause here. What would you do in this situation? Comment 1 if you'd go straight to the police, or 2 if you'd confront your father first. Let me know what you think. I didn't go to the police, not yet. Instead, I called my friend Jessica, who works as a paralegal at one of the biggest law firms in Connecticut. I told her everything. Holy shit, Emma, she breathed. This is criminal conspiracy, elder abuse, fraud, probably attempted murder. I know, but I need to do this right. If I go to the police now, my father's a financial advisor. He has connections. He'll lawyer up immediately, and who knows what evidence will disappear. I need to make this airtight. What do you need from me? I need a lawyer who specializes in elder abuse and financial crimes, someone who can't be intimidated, and I need them yesterday. Jessica got me in touch with Margaret Thornton, a 58-year-old attorney who looked like somebody's grandmother but had a reputation for destroying white-collar criminals. She'd prosecuted 3 major elder abuse cases in the past 5 years, winning convictions in all of them. I met her in her office in Hartford and showed her everything I'd found. She was quiet for a long time reading through the documents. Finally she looked up. Miss Hartwell, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder abuse and fraud I've seen in my career. Your father has systematically drugged your mother, stolen her inheritance, falsified medical records, and appears to be planning to let her die to avoid discovery. This is criminal on multiple levels. Can we stop him? We can do better than that. We can make sure he loses everything. But I need your help. And I need you to be strong for your mother, because this is going to get ugly. I can be strong, I said. Tell me what to do. We spent the next week building the case. Margaret brought in a private investigator who verified the offshore accounts. We got statements from Dr. Chen about my mother's condition. We subpoenaed Dr. Mercer's medical records and discovered he'd had his license suspended twice in other states for questionable prescribing practices. The PI tracked down Veronica Reynolds. Turned out she was a consultant for my father's firm, despite having no financial background. She'd been paid $240,000 over the past 3 years for services. Her apartment in Manhattan, $8,500 a month, was paid for by a shell company my father controlled. We interviewed Svetlana, who was so relieved to tell the truth that she cried for an hour. She provided the medication schedules, bottles of pills my father had given her, and testimony about the times she'd questioned the dosages and been told to mind her own business. And then Margaret did something brilliant. Your father is planning to sign that DNR and wait for your mother to die naturally, she said, which means he's not expecting any interference. So let's give him a reason to act rashly. Let's make him think he's won. My father was throwing a party. Of course he was. It was his 60th birthday scheduled for Saturday, September 21st at the Westport Country Club. 200 guests, dinner, dancing, speeches. Claire had flown in from Bali. Marcus was bringing his new girlfriend, another blonde. My mother was still in the hospital, now under the care of a real doctor who was slowly weaning her off the medications and monitoring her recovery. She was lucid for longer periods now. She knew what had happened, and she was furious. I want him destroyed, she'd told me, her voice shaking with rage. I want him to lose everything, Emma. Everything. He will, Mom, I promise. The country club was decorated beautifully. White flowers, string lights, a jazz band playing in the corner. My father held court in the center of the room, looking distinguished in his tailored suit, Veronica Reynolds at his side. She was introduced as his colleague. No one questioned it. I arrived at 7:30 p.m., wearing a black dress and carrying a briefcase. My father saw me and frowned. Emma, I wasn't sure you'd come. Wouldn't miss it, Dad. Happy birthday. Claire rushed over, champagne in hand. Oh my God, isn't this amazing? Dad really went all out. He certainly did, I said, looking around. Must have cost a fortune. Well, he deserves it, Marcus said, joining us. After everything he's been through with Mom. I smiled. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk about. Dad, can I borrow the microphone? I have a birthday tribute I'd like to give. He looked wary. Emma, I don't think— Please, Dad, it's important. The room was watching now. My father couldn't refuse without causing a scene. He nodded tersely. I walked to the small stage where the band had been playing. Tapped the microphone. Hi everyone, for those who don't know me, I'm Emma Hartwell, Robert's oldest daughter. I wanted to take a moment to honor my father on his 60th birthday by sharing some things about him that you might not know. My father's face was going red. Veronica looked confused. My father is a financial advisor. He's trusted with people's money, their futures, their security, and he takes that trust very seriously. I paused. So seriously, in fact, that when my grandmother passed away 8 years ago and left my mother an inheritance of $2.8 million, my father made sure to handle every detail personally. The room went quiet. He was so thorough that he moved the entire inheritance to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He forged my mother's signature on the transfer documents. And then, 3 years ago, when my mother started asking questions about where her mother's money had gone, he began systematically drugging her to keep her quiet. Emma, my father roared, moving toward me. Stop this right now. I have medical records, I continued, pulling documents from my briefcase. From Greenwich Hospital, showing that my mother has been overdosed on benzodiazepines and sedatives for 3 years. I have the medication schedules that my father personally wrote out. I have emails between my father and Dr. Howard Mercer, who was paid $75,000 to falsify diagnoses and prescribe dangerous levels of drugs. People were gasping. Some were pulling out their phones. I also have bank statements showing that over the past 3 years my father has spent $240,000 on his mistress, Veronica Reynolds. I pointed to her. She had gone white. That money came from my mother's inheritance, the inheritance he stole. You insane bitch, my father shouted, reaching the stage. Security, get her out of here. But I wasn't done, and I have a DNR order that my father signed 48 hours ago, while my mother was unconscious from a drug overdose. Not because she's dying, but because he wants to make sure that when the drugs finally kill her, no one saves her. Because dead women can't report theft. The room exploded. People shouting, chairs scraping, Marcus yelling at me to shut up, Claire crying. And then the doors opened. Detective James Morrison of the Connecticut State Police walked in, followed by 4 uniformed officers. "Robert Hartwell," Detective Morrison said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent." My father's face went from red to white to gray. His hands were trembling as they cuffed him. "This is insane," he kept saying. "You can't, They let him out. Veronica tried to follow, but another officer stopped her. "Ms. Reynolds, we have some questions for you as well, about the money you've received from Mr. Hartwell's accounts." She burst into tears. I stepped off the stage. The room was in chaos, some people leaving, others clustered in groups, everyone talking at once. Marcus grabbed my arm. "What the fuck did you just do?" "I saved Mom's life," I said calmly, "and I stopped a thief. He's our father. He's a criminal who was slowly killing our mother for money. But you knew that, didn't you?" I looked at him carefully. "How much did he promise you, Marcus, for Mom's inheritance?" His face told me everything. "You knew," I breathed. "You knew he was drugging her." "I didn't, it wasn't like that." "Get away from me," I said quietly. "Both of you. I don't want to see you again." Claire was sobbing. "Emma, please, we can fix this." "No," I said. "We can't. This is fixed for the first time in years. This is actually fixed." I left the country club and drove straight to the hospital where my mother was awake and waiting. "Is it done?" she asked. "It's done." She closed her eyes and smiled. "Good." The trial took 8 months. It was brutal. My father hired a team of expensive lawyers who tried every tactic, claiming my mother had willingly transferred the money, that the medications were legitimately prescribed, that I was a vengeful daughter making false accusations. But Margaret Thornton was relentless. She brought in forensic accountants who traced every dollar. Dr. Chen testified about my mother's condition. Svetlana testified about the medication schedules. The private investigator presented evidence of the offshore accounts and the forged signatures. Dr. Howard Mercer took a plea deal and testified against my father, admitting he'd falsified medical records in exchange for $75,000. He lost his medical license permanently. Veronica Reynolds was charged as an accessory to fraud. She claimed she didn't know the money was stolen, but text messages showed otherwise. She took a plea deal, testified against my father, and was sentenced to 3 years probation and ordered to repay $240,000. Marcus was subpoenaed. Turned out my father had promised him $500,000 from my mother's inheritance when she passed. He wasn't charged, there was no evidence he knew about the drugging, but his career at Goldman Sachs ended when the story went public. Last I heard, he's selling insurance in Florida. Claire tried to maintain neutrality, then begged me to drop the charges, then cut contact when I refused. She's still in Bali, still posting Instagram stories. I have her blocked. My father was convicted on all counts: elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, forgery, and attempted murder. The judge sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison. He'll be 78 when he gets out. "You have violated the deepest trust that exists," the judge said at sentencing. "You betrayed your wife, your family, and your profession. You deserve every day of this sentence." My father stood there shrunken in his prison jumpsuit, and for a moment our eyes met. I thought he might apologize, or show some remorse. Instead he said, "You ruined this family, Emma, this is all your fault." I smiled at him. "No, Dad, I saved it." My mother lives with me now, in a house I bought in Madison, Connecticut, a cozy colonial with a garden she tends every morning. Her health has improved dramatically since stopping the medications, though she still has some tremors and memory issues that may never fully resolve. She's in therapy. So am I. Turns out having your father try to murder your mother for money leaves some emotional scars. But we're healing. She enrolled in watercolor classes at the community center. She volunteers at the public library. She has friends, real friends, who knew nothing about the old Catherine my father created. Sometimes she talks about the lost years. "I knew something was wrong," she says, "but I couldn't think clearly enough to understand what. It was like being trapped in fog." "You're not trapped anymore," I tell her. "Because of you. I was promoted to senior accountant at my firm, then headhunted by a larger company in Hartford. Now I'm the CFO of a mid-sized nonprofit making good money doing work that matters. I'm also dating someone, a defense attorney named Thomas who I met during the trial. He saw me at my worst, fighting for my mother's life, and somehow fell in love with the woman he met in that courtroom. "You're terrifying," he told me on our first date. Is that a compliment? It's the highest compliment I can give. My mother's inheritance, what's left of it after legal fees and restitution, is in a trust for her care. She set up a scholarship fund for nursing students in my grandmother's name, $100,000 a year to help young nurses get their education. My mother believed in helping people, she told me when she established the fund. This is how I honor her, not by letting her money sit in some account but by using it the way she would have wanted. 6 months ago Marcus reached out, asked if we could talk. I said no. 3 months ago Claire sent an email, a long rambling apology about not knowing, not understanding, being manipulated by Dad. I didn't respond. Some people think I'm too harsh, that family is family, that people deserve second chances, that forgiveness is strength. Maybe they're right, but I watched my brother and sister stand by while my father slowly killed my mother for money. I watched them enjoy the benefits of stolen inheritance. I watched them choose comfort over truth. They made their choices. I made mine. My mother and I have dinner together every Sunday. We cook, we talk, we watch old movies. Sometimes we don't talk at all, we just sit together in comfortable silence. Last Sunday she took my hand and said, "I never told you this, but before your grandmother died she told me something." She said, "Catherine, you have 3 children, but only one of them has your mother's spine. Watch over Emma. The world is hard on women who refuse to bend." I felt tears sting my eyes. Grandma said that? She did. And she was right. You saved my life, Emma. You saved yourself. And you didn't bend, not even when it would have been easier. I learned from the best, I said, squeezing her hand. Last month I got a letter from my father. His lawyer forwarded it. I have a restraining order so he can't contact me directly. It was 3 pages of self-justification, how he'd been stressed, how Veronica had seduced him, how the money was rightfully his because he'd managed the household finances for 30 years, how I'd destroyed his life over a misunderstanding. Not one word of apology, not one admission of guilt, not one moment of remorse. I burned it in the fireplace and didn't think about it again. Because here's what I've learned. Some people will never accept responsibility. Some people will always be the victim in their own story, no matter what they've done. And that's not my problem anymore. If you've made it this far, thank you. If this story touched you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories like this. And remember, your worth is not determined by how your family treats you. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to hurt you. It doesn't give them ownership of your life, your body, or your silence. My father thought he could drug my mother into submission. He thought he could steal from her and get away with it because she trusted him. He thought no one would question him because he was successful, respected, charming. He was wrong. The truth is punishment enough. It cost him his freedom, his reputation, his family, and his future, and it gave my mother her life back. If you're in a situation where you suspect abuse, financial, medical, emotional, physical, trust your instincts. Document everything. Seek help from professionals who can't be intimidated. Build your case carefully, and when you're ready, tell the truth. Even if your voice shakes, even if people call you crazy, even if your whole family turns against you, tell the truth anyway, because somewhere someone is trapped in fog like my mother was, and they need someone with enough spine to cut through the lies and pull them out. Be that person. I was, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat.